Hey, Aaron Rabinowitz here. In part 1 of this tutorial, we designed these cool holographic Redshift materials that you can use anywhere. In part 2, we're going to use them to help us create this final result. Let's jump into it. Okay, now we're going to start creating a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to use for the final render. I'm going to make this sphere invisible. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to focus on just this cylinder. I might even just go, I don't think it really matters too much. I can set the coordinates back to 0 on the x-axis. Now it's center, and we can work with that. And what I'm going to do is create a cloner, and I'm going to drop this cylinder into the cloner like this. Okay, so it creates a grid of different cylinders, and I want to spread that out and make a bunch more. So let me go over to the cloner settings here, and I'm going to go into the object, and I'm going to set the number of cloners like this on X. I want a whole bunch on X. And I don't think we need more than this, maybe just a tiny bit more there on the Z, and only the one on the Y, because we don't want to have them go up. We just want them to be spread out on the side and forward. And I'm also going to set the Z back a little bit so it's tightened up just a bit there. And let's lower the size of X for now. We have a lot of stuff. It'll all get worked out as we go. Then with my cloner still selected, I'm going to go over to MoGraph and choose Effectors, and from there, Random. And that automatically creates random X position, X, Y, Z. So let's take a look at that. Select the random effector and jump into the parameters here. And I do want the position to be affected. I don't need the Y affected at all, really. But, you know, we can do that on the X, just get things really nice and mixed up. And the Z, just a tiny bit. We don't need too much. And from here, I really want to also work with the rotation. And I'm going to work with just this rotation, the P here, just to get that a little bit like this, and the B right there. So we've got all this happening just like that. And I feel like as I'm looking at this, these cylinders are probably too thick. So I'm going to set the radius maybe down to 7. We get lots of little pieces like that. And of course, go back to the cloner and start messing around until I get to something that I like. I think in this case, the size of the X maybe like that. Maybe we need more in the X. Bring this down. Just want to fill that background with this stuff here. I'm also going to make these cylinders taller, so we can bring that height up to 1,000, maybe even more if we need to. I think we'll be okay. Finally, I just want to go into my orthographic view here, pull back, and I think I want to take both the wall, so we've got our plane, and I want to take this cloner, and I want to move both of them further back. And then it probably means that I need to scale things up just a little bit. So coming back into here, probably want to scale up that wall in the background. So I'll select my plane and scale that up. I think the rest of it's fine right now. Next, I'm going to add in a sphere, and we're going to duplicate that sphere so that it fills our scene. So I'll choose sphere, and I'm going to also choose icosahedron. I just happen to like the way those look. They're easier to get to look round and clean. So I'll bring up the segments a bunch. And from there, I'll alt-click on a cloner and add it inside of a cloner, and we can add a whole bunch. So let me say 4 by 4 by 4. That's a lot. We also want to scale down the sphere a little bit. I want to get them nice and small. Not too small, and we're going to play with the size random as well. And we're also going to just tighten up the coordinates on this. So let me just get back to the cloner. We're going to bring down the Y, rotate a little, get this all centered. Right, we're going to bring down the Z, the X, let's bring it all together. And okay, that's looking good. And then to mix things up, I'm going to select my cloner, make sure it's selected, and choose MoGraph, Effector, and Random. And we're going to see these things moving around. It's actually not the position that I want to mess with. We're going to do that a different way. Let me pull back a little bit. We're going to use the scale. So let me turn off position for now. I don't think we need that. We'll go with scale, and we'll set uniform scale, and we can choose how we want that to be. If they're still too big, if you feel like they're too big, then we can also go back to the original sphere, and we can lower the size there. And now we've gotten a whole bunch of different sizes right here like this. That's good. Next, I want to dynamically place these objects so that they're all clumped together. And I don't have to set them up each individually as dynamic objects. So we're going to use a little hack that I saw in a tutorial from Nick Campbell. I'm going to select my cloner, and I'm going to choose C to convert it all to editable objects. And then I'm just going to select everything in there, and I'm going to choose the dynamic place tool. And as soon as I do that, you can see that they start behaving like dynamic objects, and I can choose to rotate them, tighten it up, right, and get this sort of, I can separate them out a little bit, I can bring it tighter, and then rotate it a little more. So, oh, that's really good. I like that one. And let's just rotate that a little bit like that. Pull in. Okay. Great. Awesome. You know, dynamics are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, but in this case, I got the salted caramels, which are like my favorite, so rock on. Okay, next, let's give these spheres a glass material. And you can open up your browser right here by clicking on this. In my case, I'm going to use a different view. I just have my browser view that I love. And this is a layout that I've created so that I can browse the Cinema 4D library of materials and objects while still working with my IPR and the regular perspective view. And whenever you change views, you often have to restart the IPR, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to look through the materials here. So I click on materials, and I can go to where I see glass right here. And you can see that there's 3 different kinds of glass. I'm going to go with the glass clear, and I'm going to apply that to the cloner parent object right here. And that's going to make all of the spheres glass. It's getting hard to see the objects in the perspective view, so I'm going to change the display to show lines just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, now I'm going to jump into the glass material right here. I'm going to double click, just open that up, select the material, and if I go down into the transmission area, I'm going to set the dispersion to, we start with, this is really interesting. You start with 0.1 and it goes completely nuts, right? That's like super distorted in terms of chromatic aberration. If you set it to something like 5, you know, you get something more. So it's like 0 is nothing, and then even slightly more than 0 is crazy. And then you have to kind of pare it down. I'm going to go with like 3. And for now, I think it's okay. I want to see these sticks a little better, so we're going to do a couple of different things. Let me go out of the view there like this, and I'm going to grab hold of the original cloner of our cylinders, and I'm going to move that back so that like they're intersecting. And so we'll start to see these little metal things inside of the glass. And maybe that's a little too far. Bring it back. Maybe even lower the radius of these cylinders to, why don't we say 5 for now, or even lower. Let's see what this looks like. You know, we'll find that balance, we'll get there, but for now let's just keep it as is. And if you remember, in our original render that I showed at the beginning of this, we didn't see all of these sticks sitting up there. We saw them through the spheres, but we weren't seeing them here. So now we're going to make those disappear. I'm going to select my cloner right here, and I'm going to choose tags and render tags, and from there, the RS object. It's got this little red icon there. And I'm just going to select that, and in the visibility section right here, I'm going to choose override, and I'm going to turn off primary ray visible. And what's happening is we're not seeing them through the camera, but we are seeing them through the glass. And you can see that because we have it set to visible in refractions. If I were to turn this off, they would disappear. So I'm going to just set that to on, visible in refractions on. Maybe I'll come back to the glass material and work with dispersion a little bit more. Maybe it's just too much. Maybe set that to 4. And I'm also going to add in a camera. So let me do that. And then I'm also going to add in a null, which will be the parent of the camera. And make sure that we're looking through the camera. And as you can see, what I'm going to do here is if I want to rotate over time, I can rotate on the y-axis. Check that out. You can see the glass showing the little pieces through, and it's really cool. It creates all this nice chromatic aberration, all this nice distortion, and these little sort of objects that you can't really make out, but they really help create the distortion and the color. So if I want to animate that over time, I'm just going to select my null object and go to my first frame, and we'll set the y-axis. We'll maybe set this to -20. That's a little too far, so a little less. And create a keyframe, and then move down to the end of my timeline, and we'll set it to 10. And we'll set another keyframe here, and now we've got it animating over time. And finally, if you want to add a lot of render time, because we're doing refractions already, that's going to slow things down a little bit. But if you really want to slow it down but get an awesome result, we're going to work with depth of field. So with my camera selected, I'm going to hop into optical. I'm going to set my bokeh to on, And for the focus object, I'm going to pick whichever of these spheres I want to keep in focus at all times. So I can select any of these. If I want to keep this one right here in focus, that's cool. Maybe I actually want to get one that's in front. We can go with this one right here. And then I can lower the aperture really low because we're working at a large scale. So if I set this to like 0.2 or maybe even 0.05 in this case, now you can really see that that's a little too much, but you can see that this part's in focus and nothing else is. So let's try maybe 0.1 and see what that looks like, and you can play with that number. But you get to see that we got the nice depth of field over there, things are happening over there, and I think that we're ready to render. Just know that this is going to take a while. Let's just look at one frame. Let me do that. And this render is now done, and as you can see, it took about 4 minutes and change to render. So if you really need that depth of field, you put it in there, it will slow things down. If you even make that depth of field even tighter, it's going to slow it down a lot more. But man, this looks really good. And of course, you can go back in and adjust the number of the cylinders and how far apart they're spread and the size of them and all of that to help fill this up and create something that looks unique to what you're doing and that you'll be happy with. Of course, I always like to take what I've rendered out of a 3D program and bring it into whether it's After Effects or Premiere Pro or some other program and do some color grading there. It really helps create a final look that you can't necessarily get right out of Cinema 4D. As always, I hope that this helps you in your work. Once again, I'm Aaron Rabinowitz. Thanks for watching.